Now let's understand the life cycle methods in the practice. Like let's define the life cycle methods. What are the how they are executed in the console.log. We'll verify what have we learned previously, right? For that purpose, let me demonstrate it with a simple example, okay, which displays the Marvel and DC heroes alternatively based on the login status. So if the login status is true, then it displays Marvel. I mean, when the user is in logged in state, and when the user is in logged out state, it displays DC heroes. And also, we'll have two components over here. One, which is the main component, which is controlling the auth, and the other component, which actually changes the sorting order. So, which will cover pretty much all of the use cases of life cycle methods, right? So, let me start write the component. So, since this all life cycle and state, it can be only possible with the class component. So I'm straightforwardly defining the class component. So first is the main component, which extends react.component. Okay, and this will render what it will render two things. Okay, one, for now, one, it is displaying the main component. So here I will display a button. Okay, so a button which when clicked on changes the state of the user. So from logged in to login, basically toggles the state. Okay, and the other is the list component. So let me define that list component, or superheroes list component. List component, this also extends the react.component, right? And it renders list. Okay, but here there is a catch. So let's add some condition over here. So if the state is in the logged in, or if the state is in logged in, it is going to display Marvel heroes, and if it is DC, it is in the logged out state, right? So what I want to do is Marvel heroes will be displayed in ordered list, that means numbered list, and DC heroes will be displayed in unordered list. Okay, so let me do that as well. So this will contain both UL and OL. So here I'll be receiving the props. Okay, I'll be receiving the props based on that. So now let me pass the data to my superhero list component. Okay, so superheroes list component. Okay, and I will also define my state. So it is also a good practice. And also in the functional components, you receive the props as an argument to the function component. Similarly, here you will be receiving argument to the constructor as, I mean, props is received as an argument to the constructor. And whenever you do this, don't forget to call super constructor with the same props. Okay, and now I'll define the state, that is this dot state is equal to both of these values, right? So let me copy this and constant Marvel heroes, constant DC heroes, right? So I have two arrays with me now, right? So I have two arrays. Let me, yeah. So main component, let me export the main component, export default main component. Okay, so you can do it at the bottom, or you can simply write the export default statement over here, right? So now along with that, I will maintain another state, that is logged in. By default it is false. Okay, by default it is false, and when the user clicks on the button, we'll change the login state to toggle between login and logout, right? And I'll pass the data. So basically I have two options. One, based on the logged in status, I can select what heroes I have to send, or I can send the directly all the heroes, Marvel and DC heroes, and let the underlying component decide what it has to render, is an unordered list or an ordered list, right? So in my case, I'll be sending all the data, all the state. So for that, I can simply do, so if I want to drill down all my state, I can simply do this dot state. So now what happens is all of the state objects. So when I'm triple dotting or when I spread the state, what it is doing, it is spreading across all the properties. So technically this is equal to or same as this Marvel heroes equal to this dot state dot Marvel heroes. DC heroes is equal to this dot state dot DC heroes and logged in. Right, logged in, which is this dot state dot logged in. Okay, so when you have such number of props, you can restructure your component this way so that it looks bit clean, right? So these are the different props which are passing, right? And you can get access to all of those props in the children component, and you can render whatever logic your component is actually doing. Okay, so as part of this, let me add one more functionality, that is changing the login status. So toggle login, right? So this is an arrow function. It is always recommended to use the arrow function over here, right? And this dot set state. So what I have to do, right? So set state can actually, you can pass directly an object in the set state, so that will append to the current state, or else this set state also takes a function as a callback function as an argument. So see, callback function, where the first argument is the previous state. So now my logged in will be toggle between previous state dot logged in. Unexpected label statement. Yeah, I should return. So this is a function body, right? So I should return logged in is equal to toggle of previous state dot logged in. So if in the previous state, if it is false, then in the current state it will be true. So the set state function is of two types. Either you can directly return the object, but if you want to access the previous state inside the set state function, you can use this type of syntax. So whatever object you are returning, it goes to the state object. Okay, so now I will call this function on the on click. Again, we'll learn more about the events and how to handle the events in the JavaScript and how we can interact with different hierarchical components using the events in our next coming videos. So this dot toggle login, right? Also, the text inside the login button keeps changing based on, so if it is logged in, it goes to log out, and if it is log out, it gets login, right? So let me do that as well. So if this dot state dot logged in is true, then you will display logout button. If it is false, then you will display login button, because if you are already logged in, you see the logout button. If you are already logged out, you see the login button, right? So this is our first component, right? And we'll write the logic of superhero list component. Okay, so here the logic is totally in this fashion. So what is the logic? If the user is in logged in state, then I will display the DC heroes in unordered list. Okay, so if the user is in let me comment it down here. Logged in equal to true, then you will display Marvel heroes in ordered list. Okay, and if logged in is equal to false, then DC heroes in unordered list. So this is the conditions which we have put ourselves to render, right? So how do you do this? Now first React fragment, okay, or you can add the div element as well, whatever is in your mind or whatever is according to your use case, right? So inside this I will add the JavaScript logic that this dot props, right? This dot props dot logged in. If this is true, then what do I render? Ordered list, right? So for that, I can create a small function which returns me that. So ordered list. So what this does is that it simply takes the data, okay, and it returns another JSX. So what is that JSX? It's a UL, and it loops over that data.map, right, and element, and whatever element you are taking, that will be rendered. So list and access reading that element property. So you can call that function directly, so ordered list, but the data which you pass is this dot props dot marvel heroes, okay, and if the login is false, then you will render unordered. So you'll call another, you'll write another function, unordered list equal to data, and now instead of UL you will render OL, and the same logic, right? It is just that you will get used to the ReactJS code. The more we write, the more types of situations I introduce, right? So this dot unordered list, and the props and the argument which you pass is DC heroes, right? So this is one way. Now let's see how is our component looking like, right? So let me refresh it. Cool. So right, by default we are in the logged out state, okay, so hence we are seeing the login button, and hence we are seeing the DC heroes, but why is it ordered? So I think I have put it in a wrong way. OL and UL, right? Yeah, now it is as expected. So the user is in logged out state, hence he is seeing the DC heroes, and when I click on the login button, that's some random thing from my browser. When I click on the login button, user is in logged in state, and he changed the list of the elements got changed to Marvel heroes, right? So now let me implement the lifecycle methods and show you how different lifecycle methods are called at different stages, right? So constructor, so in the mounting phase, what all life cycles do we have? Constructor, and then get derived state from props. This is the one life cycle method. So this life cycle method gets props and state as an argument. So whatever object you return is treated as the state. So basically you will have access of props from the parent component. Here it is the parent component, so you technically don't have to define anything, right? And yeah, so get derived state from props. So whatever props you are receiving. From that, if you want to derive the state of this component, then you can do that. And let me add a console.log that is get derived state from props, and the component name is main component. So let's see the order of execution. Okay, and next we have the render, which is already implemented. Then we will define, so let me pull out this function to the top or below the constructor, which is usually the location we maintain. And next we have component did mount, right? So this is the one component lifecycle which is called at the last of the mounting phase, and it is only called once in the lifetime of the component. So let me add the component did mount. Okay, component did mount, and the component name is main component, right? So this is one lifecycle, and we have another lifecycle that is should component update. So in the updating phase, first in the mounting phase, what all different life cycles we have? Mounting phase has constructor, then get derived state from props, then we have render, and then we have component did mount. Now we have implemented all of these phases, and in the updating phase we have get derived state from props. So the same function will be called in both updating and mounting phase, so you don't have to define second one. And second we have should component update, right? And third we have render, and fourth we have get snapshot before update, right? And the last thing is get snapshot before update, and the last thing is component did update in the updating phase, right? So in the last unmounting phase we have component will unmount, all camel casing, right? So we defined the mounting phase life cycles. Now let me add the updating phase. So in the updating we should have component should update, and by default I am returning true, but ideally you will have access to the props so that you will check, okay, if the data is getting changed or not. On that basis you will decide whether to update or not. And then you have get snapshot before update function, get snapshot before update, right? So let me add the console.log, so to identify which lifecycle method it is. Console.log should component update, and the component name main component, right? And the other lifecycle method is console.log get snapshot before update, and the component name is main component, right? But one thing with this lifecycle method is that if you have implemented get snapshot before update, it is mandatory thing that you need to implement the component did update lifecycle for sure, otherwise it will throw an error. So whenever you are using the get snapshot before update lifecycle, you need to implement this component did update lifecycle method for sure, otherwise it will throw an error. So please keep that in mind, otherwise anyhow it will throw the error, so nothing will happen, right? So here in the component did update, so I'm just doing the console.log basically for making API calls and for fetching the data from the server. Component did mount and component did update are the better lifecycle methods, right? And let me add the component name. And last I will add in the render function as well. So that is console.log render main component. So this way I have defined all of the lifecycle methods, right? All of the lifecycle methods, and technically component will unmount is there, but in our current setup we cannot change the component or we cannot remove the component. So I'll just define this, but I'll show this later on how it is implemented. But just keep in mind that this component will be called when the component is being just removed from the browser window, right? So yeah, I'll add the console.log in the constructor as well. Console.log constructor and component name. So pretty much filled with all the lifecycle methods, right? And component did mount, component did update, and all of these lifecycles. So now let's see in the browser what's happening, right? So by default, let me look at the console, right? So yeah, so first lifecycle which is called is constructor, the main component. Perfect. In the mounting phase we see constructor. The mounting phase we see constructor get derived state from props, render, and component did mount. So constructor get derived state from props, render, and component did mount. So all these have been verified. So in the mounting phase, these are the prop lifecycle methods which are called in the order. And now in the updation, so when a user performs any action, he get to see the update, right? The component enters into the updation phase. So when I clicked on the update button, the state has changed. The logged in has been toggled. So in that, again, in the updation phase, you get to see get derived state from props, should component update, render, get snapshot before update, and component did update. So again, the order remained the same. Get derived state from props, component should update, render, and get snapshot before update. So this is the order of execution of each lifecycle methods, and as the name itself says, component is used for constructor is used for initialization. Get derived state from props is used for deriving state from the props. Component did mount. This is the place where you can fetch the data from the backend for the first time on the initial load. And should component update basically determines if the component should update or not. If I return false from here, and let me reload the page, and when I click on the button, see, even when I click on the button, it is not getting updated because I returned the false statement from here. So basically this is controlling the rendering power. So should it render or not, right? And same way, get snapshot before update. If you want to access the component how it used to be just before the update, it still has access, but it is mandatory that if you implement this method, then you should definitely implement the component did update, and component will unmount will be called at the last when the component is just being removed. Okay, so now let's see what are the different types of arguments each lifecycle method receives, and we will also see how the lifecycle methods of parent and child are affected, right? Because here we are passing the data from parent to the child, so there should be some kind of knowledge on this also, how both of this play in action, right? So let's see all of those again. Now we have seen each of the component lifecycle methods. So now let's define what are the different arguments each of these components receive, right? So each of these lifecycle methods receive. Component did mount doesn't receive any arguments. Get derived state from props receives both props and the state which has been initialized in the constructor. Component did mount that won't receive any arguments, but it has access to all the props and state inside the component. And here we have previous props and previous state. you in the should component update, you have access to we'll see should component update. Should component will have access to next props, comma, next state. So based on that, so you'll have access to both next props and next state. And if the current state is equal to the next state, then you can simply stop the rendering, right? Because it is not needed. So both the states are changed and you don't have to render it again. So with this should component update, you can control the rendering. And get snapshot before update will have previous props and previous state, right? And whatever snapshot you are returning from here will be received by this. So previous in the component did update, we will have previous props, comma, previous state, and also the snapshot which has been returned from here. And component will mount will not receive any arguments. Okay, so these are the different types of arguments which are injected by the React, right? Now let's add all of these lifecycle methods to the child component as well. Okay, out of these lifecycle methods to the child components as well, and I'll define the constructor and props super dot props. Okay, so and this dot state here. Now I will use the get derived state from props. So I'm applying a condition over here, right? That is, if the logged in status is, then I'm getting the Marvel heroes. If the unordered list is, if the logged in status is false, then unordered, right? In this case, what I can do is I can simply have superheroes as an empty array, right, in the initialization stage. And when the get derived state from props in this function, what I can do is from the props, okay, from the props. So if, or you can simply do this, return superheroes. If props dot logged in is equal to true, then return Marvel heroes. And if props dot Marvel heroes, right? So now I'm deriving my state of this superhero list component based on a condition. So basically I'm deriving the state, right? I'm not directly accessing the state. And props dot DC heroes. So what am I trying to do here? I'm deriving my state based on the condition. If it is a logged in, then the superheroes array will contain Marvel heroes, and if it is a logged out, then it will have DC heroes. So how do I render this now? It is pretty straightforward. And this dot so directly in both of these scenarios, I will have to just do this dot state dot superheroes. So that's it. Now I don't need access to both of the properties, what do I say, Marvel heroes and DC heroes. I'm just filtering it out in the very start of the get derived state from props. And whenever if the parent component changes, then this get derived state from props is called in the update phase also. And that's how you control the rendering even in the update phase and in the mounting phase. So let me add the console.log here and rename it. Okay, so all the main components I'm replacing it, right? Yeah. So in the should component update also, what I'm checking is if this dot props.loggedin is equal to next props.loggedin, then return false. It means in both of the situations, if both logged in and in the both the scenarios, before and after, if it is same, then don't update my component, because my component is totally dependent on the logged in status. Otherwise, return true. Okay, and yeah, so I have this in place now. Let's see what is the order of priority of execution of different lifecycle methods when you compare both uh, parent and child, right? You will be a bit surprised. Let's see. Right? Cool. So if you see now, first the constructor of the main component is called, get derived state props of the main component is called, then the render of the main component is called, and then the lifecycle methods of children components get started called, right? So we didn't add the constructor over here. Console.log constructor, and it is superhero list component, right? So now let me refresh it again, right? So if you closely observe, first the constructor of parent component, then constructor of get derived state from props of parent component, and then render of the parent. Now the life cycles of children component started calling themselves. See, constructor of superhero list, get derived state from superhero list, component did mount of superhero list, and once the children is mounted, then the lifecycle method of parent is called. So it means when there is a big hierarchy of components, the lifecycle methods depends on first the children should be completely rendered. All the children elements should render, then the parents will render, then the hierarchy. So it is the downward upward direction. So in always remember that until your children component is not completely rendered onto the browser window, your parent component is not rendered. Okay, so now I'm clicking on the login button, which means I'm changing the state. I'm updating the state. So even in this case, get derived state from props of the main component, should component update of the main component, render of the main component, and get derived state from props of the superhero list component, and get snapshot before update. So here, if you see, so get snapshot before update. Where is the should component update? Should component update. I didn't add the console over here. Let me add it again. Console.log should component update and superhero list component. Right? Did I miss anything? Yeah, I did miss one more thing. That is render of superhero list component. So let me show you again. Right? So constructor get derived of main, render of main, and again constructor of superhero list component, then get derived state from super. So all the life cycles of superhero list, once they are completed till here, then in the mounting phase, the life cycle methods of parent gets completed in the mounting phase. Similarly, in the update phase, when I'm clicking on the update, right, superhero list, so it is saying get derived state from props of the main, then should component update of the main and render of the main, and get derived state from props of the superhero list. So all the life cycles after the render, after the render of the children, then the lifecycle methods of the parent will be called. So first initiation in the updation, then get derived state, component should update, render, get snapshot before update. This is all superhero list component, and then component then the lifecycle methods of again main component, right? Did update. And so see, snapshot before update is called back to back, the children component and the main component, then the component did update of the superhero list component, and then the main component. And here it is showing us a warning. Let's read what is it. A snapshot value must be returned as you have written undefined. So when you're defining this snapshot, you should either return null. So where is that? Get snapshot before update. So simply return null. So you cannot leave it as is. It's giving us an warning, not error. Return null. Right now it is clean. So login. So it's pretty clean. Okay. Get derived state, all of this. So please keep this in this execution of hierarchy. You define the lifecycle methods, you put on the console.logs, you will understand what is the order, and then there will be no surprises while you are building a complex application, right? So here I have used the get derived state from props to derive my state and filled the superheroes component. Okay, now let me add another button, okay, just to showcase that if what happens if the state of the children component is changed. So now parent has changed, hence we are forcing the children. Now we'll try to change the state. We'll try to change the state of only the children component. Okay. So here what I'll do is I'll sort the array, right? So I'll sort the array, sort heroes. Okay, and this will be called on this button click, this dot sort heroes. And what am I doing? This dot set state will be called with superheroes. And how do I sort? Simple. This dot state dot superheroes, this dot state dot superheroes dot sort. That's it. So now I'm trying to update the state of child component alone. Okay, now let's see what's happening, right? So let me give it a meaningful name, sort heroes. Okay, so and also I'll bring it bit bottom. Yeah, so cool. So when I'm logging in, I'm getting to see the heroes in different order, and we already seen what is the component lifecycle execution. In the same way, when I click on the sort heroes, so see, sort heroes called both of this get derived state from props and component did update, but it didn't force the update because there is nothing changed. If you see, when I'm clicking on the sort heroes, this is because the should component update is returning false. Why? Because the props in the previous and in the next stage both are same, right? So if this is true, then if this condition is true, we are returning false, right? Hence the should component update is not triggering the actual update, right? Then how we can avoid this? So you can put another condition that it's bit doesn't make sense over here. Next state dot superheroes of 0th element is equal to this dot state dot superheroes of the 0 element. So if the 0th element of both in the next state and the current state are also same, then return false. Okay, now let me see what's happening. For now, I'll remove this logic itself. Fine. Why to add more complexities to already the complicated code, right? So remove, and now I'm sorting. See, sorting. So when I changed the state of children, when I change the state of children, only the children components have been updated. See, parent component, there is no update. And even in the same way, if there are any siblings, nobody will be updated. But when the parent component is updated, see, all the life cycles, all the childrens are re-rendered. So that's why it is important to determine it. That's why it is important to determine where to put the state and how you are controlling the state very well, because that will control a lot of re-rendering, and a lot of re-rendering means a lot of performance effects on the browser window. So that's all in pack for you about the different lifecycle methods and how lifecycle methods are executed when there is a single component or when there is a multiple components, and how the children lifecycle methods are executed first and then the main component, I mean the parent component lifecycle methods, and what are the different arguments which you receive for the different lifecycle methods, and what are the different use cases. So both in component did mount and component did update, you can use it for making the API calls. So you need to have a very strong grip of all of these lifecycle methods, and that will really help you become a confident ReactJS developer. Okay, so with this knowledge, we'll move on to build a small application, very small application, and that will be fun, right?